Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel, on Apple Podcasts, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel, or Spotify. We recommend that because it gets up there quicker lately. Also, check out Off the Floor. That's our Discord server. Speaking of quick, something happens, we post it there. You comment on it. This is the place for the most heat anywhere, separated into 10 different channels. We do that for you. And you get access to our stage shows. So during the draft, you're going to want to, want to be on the draft channel for sure. Also going to want to be checking out Playback. We'll be on there, playback.tv/5RSN. But just click on the link in the description. You bypass the Apple upcharge and get in on Off the Floor. Also check out Prize Picks. We know no NBA, NFL, but Prize Picks is still going. WNBA, MLB, and of course, getting ready for the fall. We'll have plenty of football coverage as well. So check out prizepicks.com. Use the code FIVE. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yeah, 5 on the floor. Ride for my dogs, where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Down to Biscayne. Kept the floor playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. Impact we trust, it's about have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports. I got Brady Hawk. You can follow me at Brady Hawk 305. Plenty of draft coverage coming up, as we mentioned. But today we're going to talk about what just happened. So the NBA season, we've not prepped for this one. Well, we do our best work when we don't prep. I shouldn't really tell my daughter that or anybody else, but it's true. Just on the spot here. 5 things that we learned from this NBA season, and because it'll give me more time to think about it, I'm going to let Brady start. I think these should be things that are somewhat instructive to the Heat going forward. So let's frame it in that way. Brady, what's one of the 5 things that we learned?
Yeah, so as you said, there's no prep work here. We're just going on the fly like we usually do. But I'll say, I mean, a lot of these are honestly podcasts that we've done in the past, couple of weeks. But I'll say one of them off the top of my head is teams improving off taking, milder swings, like not having to go for the big fish swing at all times. We're kind of, constantly doing these podcasts on different guys that pop up over the last few seasons, going after Dame, going after KD, going after Donovan Mitchell, et cetera, and obviously it not working out. We see teams like, OKC take us, the Paul George into the Shea thing, or Halliburton landing in Indiana, or just down the line, or, even Anthony Simons ending up in Boston for a year. Like it not always having to be the big name, the big guy, the number one guy, even though it feels like Miami needs that on this roster. Maybe that's not the avenue to doing it. Maybe it's the trade before the trade. Maybe it's like there's a bridge here that I feel like the thing to learn about this season is that the East, I mean, this might be its own, takeaway itself but the East is wide open. And that's why what we keep saying. And with it being wide open, there's also the fact of teams that are not that great in the Eastern Conference as well, that you're kind of stuck in this middle ground, as we keep saying, that you're not going to be too low, but you have the opportunity of being decently high if you make certain moves. So my kind of big, number one takeaway from this season is that, it's not the way things were like even 8 to 10 years ago, or maybe even sooner. Like right now, it feels like teams can make decent jumps off smaller moves than the big name, throwing the farm at a big name. So maybe there's a smaller swing to be made.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and how it applies to the Heat, because that's kind of how I'll try to frame some of these as we go forward. You mentioned, do they have the players on the roster right now that can improve enough to kind of be that small swing, so to speak, or do you need to find them elsewhere? And, so far, they've taken a swing at Kevin Durant, which would be a much bigger piece. And I'll do another episode on what exactly happened there at the end, because I think there's been some misreporting on it. But then the question becomes, okay, how do you reshape the roster and add players who you can count on, who you can count on in your 8 to 9 man rotation? And I think that's the other thing. And I'll get to number 2 on this because I think it pivots to it. Depth matters now a lot. And that plays into the take the small swing and add other pieces. But it's going to be very, very, very difficult for teams to put 3 really highly paid guys together. It is, unless they're willing to pay for it, give up the vehicles that come with being over the aprons. The league is designed now to create parity. It's designed basically to break up so-called super teams. And the only way to really build a super team is the way OKC is doing it, which is to get guys on rookie contracts. And then when you have guys on rookie contracts, then you'll have decisions to make. But if you have other draft picks, like for instance, this conversation, even in the past 12 hours, that after winning a championship, OKC may package 2 or 3 picks to move up into the top 6 of this draft and add another premium young player. Then it starts to feel like they just got an endless cycle here, that it's going to be very hard to knock them out of it. But we saw what they did with their depth. You had a guy in Aaron Wiggins who sometimes he wouldn't even play very much, and other times could give you 17. And Indiana, for that matter. Okay, look at what their bench did. TJ McConnell changed a lot of games. Obi Toppin changed a lot of games. They got a lot of production out of those guys. It's not just about the starting lineup that you put together. And again, applying it back to the Heat, then Brady, it was a struggle to find a 7-man core last year. And some of that was the Jimmy stuff and then bringing other guys in. But they had a couple of players that they were forcing minutes to in Rozier and Jaquez who were really negative production players for the majority of the season. It was difficult. And then Jovic's injury. We saw Larson get time at times, but there just wasn't like a core of like 8, 9, or even 10 guys. And so when Spoelstra says our depth is a strength, just having players is not enough. You have to be able to count on the players to give you some consistency. It doesn't have to be greatness every night, but give you consistency. You knew what TJ McConnell was going to give the Pacers night to night. And with the Heat, you just didn't know what some of these players were going to give you.
100%. Look, a few years ago when the Heat were making playoff runs, their depth was what they relied on. That was kind of always what pushed them over the edge. And what we saw last year was that they just didn't have a lot of help in many other areas with their role players. And some of it was injury. I mean, they had role player injuries as well, and they had to mix things up. But still, it was not at the level that it's been over the last few years. But I'll segue this into the third one. Because this is just an obvious one, but I have to mention it. Of things you learn is because it's always preached defense wins championships, defense first. The Heat are always going to be defense first. They have a defensive-minded coach. They have defensive, their best players, defensive player of the year finalists. That's always going to be their motto. But this league is changing, and they have to form with the offense. And we've done podcasts on it. The offense I'm looking at like even offensive rating, like the 1 through 30 in offensive rating in the regular season this year. And it almost looks like you're looking at a ranking of teams, like from best to worst, because the offense is kind of the tell right now of how good your team is going to be. The Heat were 21st, and they're kind of with the teams that they're with at the bottom of the league. It's just not a great look. It's not the teams that you want to be bundled up with. And if you're going to be bundled up with those teams, that's kind of the thing we talk about picking a direction. You'd hope that they would be, in a position where they're getting higher picks consistently if that's where your offense is sitting. But they're overachievers with the defense and making those late pushes. But I just say the offense in general, they relied so heavily, I feel like these earlier Jimmy years on, like you mentioned the role players, but like their role players were big scorers for them. They relied on them as the Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, Caleb Martin. These guys were like big time scorers for them that were getting up to double digit points per game. They don't have that now. So now you're leaning on your 2 best players even more so. And that's not like a good formula for this team that you need Tyler and Bam putting up that many points per game. And it goes back, I think, also to your 3rd best player. And that's going to be kind of the question mark with Andrew Wiggins heading into the season, if he's going to be on the roster or not. You're going to need that 3rd piece to be somebody that can be consistently putting up points to just push this team in another direction. So my just main takeaway from this season is that the teams that were scoring, the teams when last year, I remember everybody was talking about Indiana, like, well, they can't compete because they can't defend. Like they can't get a stop. Yeah, they can put up a bunch of points, but that's not ultimately going to matter. Well, that wasn't the case this year. I mean, they put up points. They played their style. And I think the piece that feeds into this as well is, like, we talked about this on another podcast as well. Indiana played their style. They played fast all the way through. The Thunder, they're like all the data shows not to shoot mid ranges. Their best players, they shot mid ranges all the way through, and they won a championship doing it. I think this league is transcending offense wise. That like I know a few years ago it was like, okay, well everybody's shooting threes, we all have to do it and play this style. But if your roster isn't built to do that, you can't be the Celtics. You can't just play that style because it's what's best for the league. Like, no, you have to play your style. So I do think there's going to be an overlook this offseason as well, as like teams like have to look at their rosters, their play style, and just play their game, because this idea of playing other teams' games is, I think we're beyond that now.
No, I'm with you on that, and that was one of the other things we came up with the Heat is they had no identity this year. We didn't know what it was. It was supposed to be, threes and layups. That was what came out of training camp. Again, Jimmy wasn't thrilled with it, and then we kind of got to a point where we don't really know what they were trying to do on a night to night, and yet, a lot of games they had 20-point leads. I mean, they did enough to get to a certain point, but I believe that what happened at a lot of the end of those games is then they didn't know what to go to. They didn't know what to get to. There was no like, okay, this is our game. When things start to get away, let's go to it. Their game for years had been let Jimmy get to the line. And then when they didn't have that anymore, and they didn't have the disruption in the passing lanes that they've had previous, and the ability, we know that they're not great in transition, even if the numbers say they're better than they may look on the eye test, that there was nowhere for them to go to. And that's something that needs to be fixed this year is what are we trying to do? And then build off of that. And again, Spoelstra put in something that was different in training camp, but ultimately, I don't think it was as the philosophy was wrong, but the players couldn't really execute it. The Jimmy thing blew everything up, and there we are. I will get to two more on the other side of this. Before we do, you should know what your identity is when you're sending money. It's got to be Cash App. All of the hosts of the 5 Reasons Sports Network have Cash App. Why? It's the easiest way to send money and the safest, okay? Make sure that when you're sending money, you know where it's going to. That happens sometimes in the wrong way, and so avoid that. Making money moves should be easy, and that's why that's Cash App. It's fast, safe, and honestly way more personalized than other apps out there. No extra hoops to jump through, no extra stress. All the tools are right there to help you cash in. You can even spice up your payments with custom text backgrounds and stamps, because why should paying your friend for brunch be so boring? If for whatever insane reason you don't already have Cash App, just download it for your phone's app store, sign up, enter our code on the floor in your profile, send $5. Make sure you send 5, of course, for 5 on the floor, and you get $10 just for getting started. So there you go. Download Cash App and sign up. Use our exclusive referral code on the floor in your profile. Send $5 to a friend within 14 days. You get $10 dropped right into your account. Terms apply. That's money. That's Cash App. Okay, here's number 4. And we should have known this already, but this is kind of a philosophy that the Heat are playing by a little bit now, and it makes some sense. Let's take the Western Conference out of it right now, because we know that's a bloodbath, but OKC still won 68 games. Okay, so even with players like Jokic, Luka, LeBron, right up and down the line, Kawhi, Harden, everybody that's in the Western Conference that provided competition this year, Curry, obviously, and then ultimately Jimmy and Anthony Edwards. That team won 68 games. Okay, so they are an anomaly team. They deserve enormous respect and all that. Okay, and maybe they are immune to one injury sinking their season, although SGA would probably hurt a lot. But what we saw in the Eastern Conference was everybody just dropping like flies. And so one of the lessons of this NBA season, and it kind of was the lesson of the previous season, because it's kind of how Indiana made it to the conference finals the year before, is just, be present, essentially. Be available when other things go wrong for other teams. Now, I mean, look at what's going on in the East now. You've got Dame out for next season. You've got Tatum out for next season. Embiid will be out for next season. We just don't know when it's going to happen officially. Halliburton out for next season. I mean, you're talking about 4 guys there that probably would be 4 of the top 8 players in the entire conference if they were healthy, and they're not there right now. And I guess that does feed into the philosophy that the Heat have, which is we're always going to push forward. Now, the frustration that Heat fans have, we're always going to push forward. Okay, well, we're not getting the player we need to help us get over the top or make ourselves a serious factor. But I think that's one of the lessons here, is that in the modern NBA, okay, even with all the better medicine and everything like that, players are still getting hurt. The load managing has not helped. I think in some ways it's hurt them because they don't practice as much as they used to. And then we're having all these kind of significant either soft tissue injuries or the real severe stuff like we've seen at times. And so I think the idea is, taking the step back. I get it. I understand why people talk about that. But then it's hard to really say that's the way to go when you can get to a finals because you draw the right matchup and somebody goes out for the season. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's the case.
Yeah, most of the injury stuff you obviously can't control, but I do think a little bit feeds into the depth thing you brought up, just because it seemed like Indiana, there's less taxing on their best players because they have so many options throughout the regular season to kind of get them through. It's what happened. I keep bringing up these teams from Miami a couple of years ago, but it's what happened with Miami. I mean, they allowed Jimmy not to have to go full-fledged, however you felt about that, as we got to the end of it. But he saved himself for later in the season. And the reason I bring that up is it's a little bit tougher for Miami because I kind of felt like, especially this past season, I thought Tyler was kind of bogging down later into the season because there was so much on him throughout the regular season. Same thing with Bam. It happened a lot of times where Bam would be really high-level numbers pre-All-Star break, and then post-All-Star break, he would be so taxed out, and Jimmy would have to take the baton from him at that point and go playoff Jimmy mode. But Bam wasn't getting a lot of the credit later in the season because he was just had so much pressure on him early in the season to do all the work. The reason I say that is just because it puts more pressure on you later into the season in the playoffs with all these injury things coming up that they have to have the depth, they have to have the bodies, they have to have the players to help out their main guys. That's why I say about the smaller swings that you can take. It's not okay, you struck out on the main guy. Okay, well, you're just going to continue with this roster and see where it goes and see where the next guy comes available. It's tough. It's tougher on your main players. So if they could find a way to help out those guys, that has to be the goal right now. Because you mentioned about picking a path. And honestly, I'll segue into the fifth one because while we're at this, I know there was a clip going around, Ethan, with Tobin, going on that rant on the radio station about, and there was a lot of things he was saying that was true, obviously. But the one thing that stuck out to me, and I want to say this because this was something we've talked about a lot, and me and Tobin have talked about this at games, is the young player thing. And I look around the league and I look about, let's say 1 through 4 in the Eastern Conference, I think had 50 wins. Those are the guys that are going for it in the Eastern Conference. Then you have kind of the 5 to 8 range that are making pushes. They're playing their main guys. They're playing their young guys. And then you have the teams that are about 9 to 15 who are all just playing their young guys. They're seeing what they have. They're seeing the potential. They're seeing what they can have moving forward. And I see Miami, that's a team that doesn't really know what tier they're in right now.
Right.
And either way, if you're in that bridge gap, you play your young guys. They're in a position right now where, as much as yes, they're an injury away from getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, as you kind of put it. But either way from that, you have to play. If you are content with not throwing your guys into trades, that you don't want to use your assets because you like the potential of these certain guys and it's not worth it to go for that guy, that's fine. But you have to lean into these guys. It cannot be Kalel Ware's not closing because he didn't get an offensive rebound or defensive or box out on this possession. Throw that out the window. Nikola Jovic is 0 for 4 from 3. You're not going to play him in this certain role because he doesn't fit the starting lineup because, you already have 2 bigs in the front court. No. If you're keeping him around, you have to find a role for this guy. You have to find somewhere to utilize him because he is your core piece. If you're calling him a core piece on this roster, you have to use him like one. So we talk about kind of the front office always being aligned and everything, but they have to kind of be aligned, I guess, across the board with Spo and everybody to kind of figure out who are their core pieces and how they're going to use them. And I really do believe that's kind of what the offseason is going to be for them, is figuring out where to put a lot of these young pieces that they are going to keep around. So that's kind of my fifth piece. Is just because I look around the league and I'm watching the playoffs and I see a lot of these young guys popping and playing through playing through mistakes and all this stuff. They have to kind of prop these guys up. And I do think they are preparing for it. I think Ware is kind of what we've seen from him last year. I think going into his second season, he will be utilized with kind of a larger role than I think we saw in his rookie year. But just in general with their young pieces, I want to see more of a lean into that, just with the way the roster is.
Well, I mean, it makes sense for all the reasons you're talking about. We've made this direction point before, but it also makes sense that if you're not willing to include these guys in trades, and maybe you're willing, but you're not willing to include all of them in trades, right? And at the same time, you're planning on maybe extending one of them, like Jovic, then yeah, you need to maximize the player. And here's the other part: the more that they play, even if other teams see their flaws, the more that they play, the more they may command in a trade if you ultimately move them. It's hard for teams to want to trade for a player that the Heat are not playing a lot. And that's something to look at here. And I know it goes counter to the philosophy. Sometimes I'm making them earn it. I understand that philosophy. Sometimes they're better for waiting. I didn't have a problem with the way that they handled Jovic in the first year. In the second year, I think it was tough again because of the injury, and he didn't really get the clean start that we wanted him to get. And then his minutes were stapled to Rozier at the beginning of the year as a starter, and I think that really hurt too. And then he was that guy who ended up getting sacrificed out of the starting lineup at the beginning. But you're going to have to lean into it right now. You can't say we're holding on to these guys because, I mean, I don't know that their young core is better than other young cores right now. I think they've drafted better than their draft position in the majority of these cases. They haven't had a lot of misses. I know people are going to mention Maxey and Bane, but again, 20 plus teams passed on those guys. They've done better than most in those spots. But again, if you're force feeding minutes to Rozier, right, when he's playing as poorly as he is, that's not helping you. And for that matter, I want them to bring Alec Burks back as insurance. Okay. But even if they need shooting, I'm not sure I want Burks playing ahead of Larson because Burks isn't going to be with you in 2 years and he's not going to be a trade piece. And I think that is the thinking that has to change here is just playing a guy because you trust him a little bit more right now is not always the way to go. This team is not winning a championship next year. Okay, I hate to say it because we're going to do a whole bunch of podcasts. They have to get growth out of the players that they keep. They have to. We can't come out another season. It's not knowing what these guys are. Now, where I think we found out more than we thought we were going to find out. That's positive. But 2 years into Jovic, and now Jaquez, not really their fault, but he took a step back. I don't really know what they are right now. And when Jaquez, I'm not sure that if we found out, it would be great because we started to find out last year. At the very least, with Jovic, this has to be if they're keeping him and they're considering giving him an extension. Niko Jovic has to be prioritized this training camp. I'm going to bang the drum on that because it's just you can't have him come out of a third season. I understand he's young, I get it, but a lot of guys in the NBA are young and they're contributing, and they got to figure out a way to get him to contribute consistently in a role that suits him this season and lean into some of his skill set in some ways because it's a skill set that they're sorely lacking in other areas. All right, Brady, appreciate it. Those are things that we've learned from this NBA season. Cash App, use the code on the floor, and then Prize Picks, use the code FIVE. Check our draft coverage. We will both, with Alex, he'll be getting all the tough questions. With Alex, we will be at the arena on Wednesday night. Have a good one.